Hello everybody and welcome back to my video game channel. I hope you enjoy this one. It's all about Virtual Racing. Virtual Racing is a Formula 1 racing video game developed by Sega AM2 and released for the arcades in 1992. The origins of Virtual Racing, along with the Model 1, date back to the development of the Mega Drive Genesis console prior to the launch in 1988. The console was a major leap forward for home video game systems, allowing them to come closer to the arcade quality. Therefore, for Sega's arcade games to remain profitable, they needed to maintain a wide gap between arcade and home video games. At a meeting held during the console's development, Sega decided to begin development on an arcade system capable of producing 3D polygon graphics. This led to the development of the Sega Model 1, along with Virtual Racing by the early 1990s. Sega had arcade competitors such as Namco and Atari Games, who predated Sega in the use of 3D polygon graphics, displaying up to 2,000 polygons per frame. So Sega increased their Model 1 system capabilities beyond that to 6,500 polygons per frame. The game was directed by Yu Suzuki and designed by Toshiro Nagoshi. I can hardly say that. Anyway, they were Sega legends to say the least. Prior to Virtual Racing, Yu Suzuki was the man behind many classic giants and the birth of many successful game series, including the Hang-On series, the Space Harrier series, the brilliant Outrun series, the Afterburn series, and I love this game, Power Drift. After Virtual Racing, Yu Suzuki then went on to launch some of the finest game series in arcade history. Let's have a look at this. In 1993, Virtual Fighter series was created. 1993 also saw the birth of the Virtual Cop series, the legendary and classic Daytona USA, the Virtual Striker series, the brilliant Scud Racer, Outrigger, and of course, the birth of the Shenmue series, which is still going on today. Basically, Yu Suzuki is a legend. He was the Steven Spielberg of Sega. Now, Toshiro is also a key figure in the development of Virtual Fighter, Daytona USA, Scud Racer and Shenmue. He is also the brains behind the games such as Monkey Ball and the brilliant Yakuza series. It's of no surprise that both of these Sega kings were only going to produce a masterpiece with Virtual Racing. Then in 1992, Virtual Racing was released into the arcades.
3, 2, 1, go!
The original arcade game has 3 levels, designated into difficulties. Beginner is Big Forest, Intermediate is Bay Bridge, and Expert is Acropolis. Each level has its own special feature, for example the amusement park in Big Forest, or the Bay Bridge itself, or the tight hairpin of Acropolis. When selecting a car, the player can choose different transmission types. VR introduced the VR view system by allowing the player to choose one of 4 views to play the game. This feature was then used in most other Sega arcade racing games. The game was released into different cabinet versions. There was the single cabinet, the VR twin cabinet, which is the standard and most common version, which is effectively 2 complete machines built into a single cabinet. There was also a deluxe version known as the VR DX cabinet type, which is also a single player machine, and this has a 69 aspect ratio monitor and 6 airbags built into the seat that will inflate and nudge the player when cornering, and 1 more airbag on the player's back that inflates under braking. The seat is also adjustable via forward and back buttons using air pressure. VRDX's force feedback steering also uses 2 cylinders to rotate the steering wheel, which differ from the electric motor and clutch system that the upright and twin versions use, so that the steering feel is quite different. Virtual Formula was released in 1993. It was unveiled at the opening of Sega's second arcade amusement park, Joypolis, where a whole room with 32 machines was dedicated to the game. Most of these units were converted into Sega's second generation IndyCar simulator, Indy 500, and are commonly found at large Sega GameWorks locations in the United States. Virtua Formula was effectively a Super DX version of VR, where the player sat in a Formula 1 car in front of a 50-inch screen. It's important to say that all the versions of Virtua Racing are linkable up to 8 players, meaning 4 twin units or 8 DX, UR or Virtual Formula cabinets can be linked together using fibre optic cables. In addition to this, there was also an optional display known as the live monitor that would sit atop of the twin cabinets and replay action shots of what was occurring with actual players in Virtual Sportscast by a virtual commentator known as Vert McPolygon. The cost of a 4-player Virtual Formula cabinet was around $250,000 in 1994. Virtual Racing was among the highest grossing arcade games of both 1992 and 1993 in both Japan and North America. The game received the award for Most Innovative New Technology from the Amusement and Music Operators Association. Virtual Racing is regarded as one of the most influential video games of all time, for laying the foundations for subsequent 3D racing games and for popularising 3D polygon graphics among a wider audience. How would I rate this game? Well, for me, this game is legendary, and it is certainly in my top 5 of all best arcade racing games, including Ridge Racer, Daytona USA and Sega Rally. It was the game that got me back into the arcades in the early 90s. Virtual Racing turned heads. I still think this is an absolute brilliant game. If I got in the cabinet today, I would still get that same feeling as I did 30 years ago. For me, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 stars. Now, we've already looked at the Big Forest level. Let's look at the other 2 levels, the Bay Bridge and the Acropolis.
Select course by wheel and step on gas pedal.
Due to the complexity of a Model 1 board, a home console version seemed very unlikely. Well, that was until 1994, when the Sega Virtual Processor chip was designed to enable a version of Virtua Racing to be played on the Genesis Mega Drive. However, I have to say this chip was extremely expensive to manufacture, leading Sega to price the game at £70 in the United Kingdom and $100 in the United States. The game renders 9,000 polygons per second with the SV chip, significantly higher than what the standard Genesis Mega Drive hardware is capable of. It also outperformed Nintendo's rival Super FX chip for the Super NES. Like the arcade original, this version includes all 3 courses, which are Big Forest, Bay Bridge and Acropolis. Each course is well designed. However, for me, I was slightly disappointed with this game version. Okay, it was pretty impressive that this game came out on the Mega Drive hardware at this particular time. However, for me, it just didn't have that arcade experience. For a start, it was only running at 15 frames per second. The control handling was awkward, too rigid, meaning that I usually ended up jerking around corners and smashing into them. It was a chore to master and it took away the fun factor. Okay, perhaps my expectations are a bit too high to expect a 16-bit console to meet the strength of the Model 1 arcade game, but this game felt slightly dull and empty. Again, it's just my personal experience. I suppose what didn't help the Mega Drive game is that I also purchased the 32X version of Virtua Racing at the same time, and that game is far superior compared to this Mega Drive game. Perhaps I'm being a little bit too hard, but for me, I'm just going to rate this game 6 out of 10 stars. It is impressive that it came out on a Mega Drive at this particular time, and the chip was very good, but it just didn't compare as well as the 32X game. So 6 out of 10 stars.
Virtua Racing! Virtua Racing!
The Sega 32X version, also known as Virtual Racing Deluxe, was released in 1994, developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega under the Sega Sports label. This makes the costly Mega Drive game look like a fumbling pleb. It runs smoother, controls better, returns all the missing background music and then plays them at significantly better quality. Sure, the arcade version is still far superior with its better draw, sharper looks and bigger vehicles, but the gap is smaller when compared to the SVP chip cousin that came out in the same year. It performed much closer to its original arcade and included 2 extra cars, stock and prototype, as well as 2 new tracks, Highland and South Park. Overall, I liked the Sega 32X version of Virtual Racing. I thought it was a good game. I played it for hours and hours and I bought it the same year as the Mega Drive game. It's a far superior game. And for that, I'm going to rate this game 7 out of 10 stars. Here's all the tracks.
One, two, three, go!
The Sega Saturn version, previously known by the working title Virtua Racing Saturn, was released in 1995 and developed and published by Time Warner Interactive. For me, you would expect the 32-bit version to be a far superior port compared to the 16-bit counterparts. Except, no, not this time. Firstly, I want to point out that the Saturn port was not handled by AM2. Instead, it gets farmed out to the Time Warner Interactive team. It's important to point out that this was a fledgling company, created after Time Warner purchased both Atari and Tengen, and then they mashed them both together into one developer blob. Nobody had previously worked on any Virtua Racing games. In fact, Sega didn't even give Time Warner Interactive the original Virtua Racing code. Well, thanks Sega. So, as the developers lacked the original source code, they had to create this version based on observation on the arcade game. Flippin' heck. The result? Well, it was a turd of a game. Okay, the game did offer 7 new tracks and 4 new cars. However, none of this hides the fact that this game is still slow and still boring. The arcade mode is insulting and feels rushed and unfinished. The levels also feel very strange. You feel that they're floating in space. It just didn't look good. It just looked very rushed. It handles poorly. In fact, it's even worse than the Mega Drive game. It's a donkey of a game, and I blame Sega for giving the legendary game out to a developer with no virtual racing experience and with no original source material to work from. Muppets! For me, I'm going to rate this game a poor and very disappointed 4 out of 10 stars. A remake was released for the PlayStation 2 as part of the Sega Classics collection, titled simply Virtual Racing. It includes 3 new courses and 4 new cars. This version of Virtual Racing looks pretty much spot on to the arcade in terms of sheer look. Everything is flat shaded, with some reflections used on the car models also. There doesn't seem to be much of anything lost in the move from Model 1 to the PlayStation 2. The game is improved, in visuals in one very important area. While the arcade original runs at 30 frames per second, the PlayStation 2 version runs at 60 frames per second. This makes for such a smoother experience. 3 new tracks are available for play, 2 completely original for this version. Modes of play include a Grand Prix mode where you can race in different lighting and weather conditions. There's also a free mode where you can choose these conditions for yourself, set up lap numbers and turn enemies on or off. Both of these modes allow you to choose the colour of your car. However, I have to say, there's just one car model in the game. The PlayStation 2 version of the game, like the arcade version, has lots of graphic drawing with sections of the track slowly filling in the distance. This is particularly noticeable when zoomed out in the bird's eye driving view. It would have been nice to see the fully flat shaded world of the game without any graphics glitch of this form. Overall, I like this version of the game and I feel it is a close match and a good feel to the arcade version. So overall, I would score this game 8 out of 10. It's a pretty good game. As part of the Sega Ages series, Virtua Racing on the Nintendo Switch was released digitally on June 2019. This version of the game is what I would call an Arcade Plus, a version of Virtua Racing that replicates yet enhances the original arcade game. This is the best version of Virtua Racing where the developers had the original blueprint, but also increased the frame rate to 60 frames per second and presented it in 16:9 aspect ratio. A key enhancement is the resolution. The arcade game runs at a resolution of 496 x 384, which is quite a high resolution for 1992, but the Switch version makes the jump to full 1080p. Comparisons with the arcade reveal one flaw in the conversion: colour reproduction. The darker hues of the original game appear lighter on Switch, with the red car taken on a pinkish colour. It seems a little bit unclear why they would actually want to do this. Content-wise, the Switch version features only the tracks and vehicle from the arcade game. It is slightly disappointing that they didn't include the extra tracks from the 32X version. The original sound has been replicated and it sounds absolutely great. And I was also quite impressed that they took the replay mode 32X version and recreated that, but made it more of an arcade type version of the song. As we've seen from this video, there are some good Virtual Racing ports available, but for the money, the Switch release is by far and away the best option. Overall, I'm going to score this enhanced version of Virtual Racing a 9 out of 10. A great game. But there you go, that was my gaming history video of the Virtua Racing series. Such a great and groundbreaking game that set the scene for all future racing games. This game certainly and definitely set the path for Ridge Racer, Daytona USA and Sega Rally, all arcade legends. I absolutely loved Virtua Racing. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It would be great if you could perhaps give me a like, and it would be even more amazing if you beautiful people would subscribe to my channel. And if you don't, well, you're not beautiful. Until then, take care, and I hope to see you all very soon.